Welcome to School's Not Out, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE students. Today's lesson is on CSEC Visual Arts. We will be focusing on My Reflective Journal 2.
I am Michelle Bright-Chinsey.
And I am Sean Lawton.
So the last time we were here, we looked at the content of the reflective journal. Today we're going to look on more of the mechanics. So, therefore, we are putting it all together. That's right. So the objectives of today's lesson is you are going to be understanding the purpose of the theme, because a lot of people had some questions about that the last time. Right? We are also going to look at how to select your artist and how to format your text and visuals. And even though we mentioned it before, we're going to mention it again.
Exactly.
The cover of the reflective journal. So let's go.
Alrighty. Alright, so the content that we would have explored the last time, we looked at the cover design, we looked at the artist statement, research of the artist of interest. We also looked at the exploration of the expressive forms. We looked at the reflection, definition of terms, glossary, and bibliography. Today, as said before, stated by Ms. Chinsey, we're going to be looking now at the mechanics, how we put it all together. And these things we would have selected based on the questions that persons would have reached out to us about. So we'll be looking at those things specifically today.
So, what is the purpose of My Reflective Journal? So most of you would have started working on your journal from grade 10 to 11. This is, for, in some cases, 4th to 5th form. So one of the things that you are doing, you are documenting your process and your progress.
Process and progress. What do you mean by that? What do you mean
Mr.
by
Lawton?
process and progress?
No, your process. How you go about investigating, how you go about with your production, the creative process or thinking behind each production and progress. How have you advanced? How have you improved? New things that arise out of the exploration for the 2 years. Yes?
You see, one of the things that I like about the process and progress that I'd like to just add to what you're saying, when you think about the progress part of it from a student standpoint, well, what I normally do is I normally do a lot of reflecting. Because you reflect to evaluate where you are at so as to determine whether or not you are achieving the objectives that you had set out to accomplish in the artwork.
And that is an important part of the process.
Exactly.
Awesome. So, here is one of the first questions we encountered. Why should I use a theme? No, a theme is an idea that guides the creative process, as we mentioned before, right? It focuses on that big idea, that message behind that big idea. And it also eliminates vagueness and misinterpretation. You imagine you're looking at somebody's journal and you go through it and have no idea, or you have misinterpreted. Poor child. Okay, so there's a picture of the cover of a journal right there. So we're looking on old regal structures. So within this journal, you're expecting to find probably landscape paintings or anything to do with structures.
Exactly.
Within this journal. So there should be no misinterpretation as long as you open it and you're seeing that theme recorded over and over and over again. Yes.
You see, one of the things that we also would like to invite our viewers to remember about the theme is that it must be something that is personal. It's not something that is prescriptive, where your teacher come to you and say to you, John or Michelle, you know, you need to work within this theme because that's what we're working, because that's what they still life drawing is going to be about.
You know how much pressure you're going to put on me as a student if you do that? So therefore, I probably have no interest in what you want me to do, and you want me to produce a body of work on the theme that you chose.
Yeah, and I think what that does, it puts the student in a natural situation where it stifles their interest and their creative voice, you know. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. You know, give the students an opportunity to develop their own sub-theme. So if we have a general idea, they can have an opportunity to say, well, as it relates to this, what is it that I like and what would I like to explore? So they have their unique voice as a part of this creative
I was speaking
process.
to a set of students recently and they asked, Miss, how do I go about choosing my theme? So we want to deal with that right now.
Yeah.
Choosing your theme. All right. You can start with what comes to mind, you know. You want to document it, either sketch or just write it down, but don't rely on only that. You want to research it and see how it can be explored in different expressive form. And we have that matter of plagiarism and the whole matter of cliche, right? So we need to consider, that's why we have to do the research.
Right.
And apart from that, we want to brainstorm, create a concept map, right? Brainstorm the ideas, explore personal and intimate knowledge about that theme. How does it relate to you? Remember, this is something you're going to have to be doing for the next 2 years if you're in grade 10. Understand? So, who wants to do something that don't relate to them? You know, this shows no connection.
I would never want to do that. And, you know, you mentioned something about cliche. Very important that when you're doing your works, you want it to represent you as an artist. You don't necessarily want to do the piece of work and it looks like, you know, you give them an assignment to create a composition using geometric shapes, and everybody, the famous heart and the famous flower design. There's nothing about the artwork that is unique about you. So when we talk about cliche, that's basically what we don't want it to look so much like everybody else. We want
somebody
it to
to
look
do
like
a
you.
logo that represents Jamaica. They're going to give you the coconut tree and the sun in the background.
And black.
There isn't more.
The black, green, and gold. Guaranteed.
Yes, you are correct. So one of the things that you can do is actually start with a concept map, right? The concept map, you're going to look at people, places, objects, and symbols. Why would we start with that concept map?
Well, it's very important because when you glance at this concept map, you realize that we're talking about the people, objects, symbols, and places. That captures almost every possible sub-theme that you could develop. So let us say, for argument, if we were to give you the theme nature, which is one of the themes we would have
every time
the life
what you want
out
to
of
do,
it.
Nature, because my version of nature is going to be different from your version of nature.
It's definitely, because nature, if we were to look at it through the lens of this concept map, we can look at nature through the lens of people.
Yes.
It can be done through objects. It can be done through places.
I know. I love texture. Texture of trees, the leaves, the fauna,
Exactly. And I can
Flora,
just imagine.
fauna.
I can just imagine
texture.
that your approach to nature, which is the main idea, and now you would have selected texture as your focus. That would now be your sub-theme.
Yes.
And that also helps us, the audience, to know that, that artwork is definitely Michelle, because that is her interest right there. That's her area of focus, and that's the kind of thing she likes to bring about in her artwork.
So it's sort of very important that you really think about your theme properly, right? Do all the brainstorming necessary.
Definitely.
Explore all angles before you actually decide on what you're going to be doing.
Exactly. And there's a critical part of this process, is that how do you come up with that sub-theme? Brainstorm is very important, because what I normally do, and I suspect you might do the same, if they give me a theme, let us say you gave me nature just now, right?
It's
the
nice
one that
to work
we use
with a sub-theme to narrow it down.
But when you brainstorm that process, you actually think about nature but through the lens or context of your personal interests.
That's right.
So you're brainstorming to get those ideas down, and you write down those ideas, and then you start to develop. Well, this is how I do it. I develop sketches to represent,
of course, thumbnail
each
sketches.
one of those ideas documented. And once that is done, I use those ideas now. So if I do 10 sketches, I look at the 10 sketches and say, okay, based on these 10 sketches that I have, which one of them best represent the theme and the sub-theme that I have selected?
That is correct.
So you can't do one sketch. Some people believe that you can do it like it's perfect the first time, but because we know we are imperfect, we have to do many sketches.
Now, the last thing I'm going to say about the theme, not that it is the least, remember, the theme is what drives you through the entire process of your production, to the entire thing. So you're looking on text and visuals as well when it comes to the theme.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're moving on. Question: how do I go about choosing an artist? Because we mentioned that they have to study artists.
Right.
Right? So they have to research an artist. Now, how do I go about choosing an artist? It was said before, but I want to re-emphasize the point. The artist must connect with you somehow. Either it's your expressive form, your drawing, your painting, your graphics, your printmaking, your textile, whatever expressive form you have, you want the artist to connect also by his or her thematic approach or the style or technique that the artist is using. Now, for example, here we have two pieces of work, one being the original painting, a picture of the original painting for Pablo Picasso, that person we always hear about, and it's entitled Old Guitarist. We know the history behind it with Pablo Picasso's Blue Period and so on and so forth. But here we have a student that is looking on Pablo Picasso as one as the artist. See how Pablo Picasso's work complements his. Now, his young guitarist against the old guitarist have things in there. As you look at it, you see some things that are common.
Right.
Right. For example, the two figures are there holding a guitar.
Right.
Right. There is some emotional things being conveyed there with the use of color. Right. There are some more. Can't you see some more?
Sure. You see, one of the things that I really like about it is that these two images that we have here, they actually help to show, one, the alignment to the expressive form. So we know that this artist is influenced by Pablo Picasso. We also see the thematic alignment because at this particular point in time, Picasso clearly was exploring the concepts related to music or musician and instruments. And the student in like manner decided that, this is something that I would like to do. You also see technique as an element because you notice that both of the pieces, they somewhat mirror each other in terms of the style that is used to render both pieces. And so you see how these artists would have connected, one, through the expressive form, two, through the thematic approach, and then three, through the techniques that are used. It's very linear and you can see it clearly.
We could, even though the theme of the student here is not said, but you can actually guess.
Yes.
You make a good guess.
Yeah.
Right? And I can't give it away. It was based on something to do with music, okay?
which is clearly seen.
But also, he was talking about mood and music. So.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And the blue.
Oh yeah.
The blue in both compositions would have been it's screaming mood.
It's screaming mood. One is more pain, and the other one, well, the one from Pablo Picasso, that blue screams pain for me. But anyway, we are moving on. No, here's another question that came up. It says, what if I have chosen more than one artist? What if I've chosen more than one artist? Well, you know that in most cases, you are researching two artists. right?
Yes.
In most cases, you're researching 2 artists, and you're to have a minimum of 5 works. Minimum of 5 works. You also are critically analyzing the works of the artists.
Right.
You're critically analyzing the works of the artists, and you are ensuring to compare and contrast all these works of the artists. But you know something? I've had students that have done 2 or 3 artists. Why? Because there's something about these artists' work that, as we said before, that connected to the theme. So 2 was not enough. 1 maybe for each expressive form, maybe another one because of some technique or some thematic approach that that artist used. And that's quite okay to do that.
And it's totally understandable, because if it is that one particular artist, you're interested in the artist because of, let us say, technique. Technique is not necessarily tied to theme or that idea, that main idea. So you may perhaps want to shift and focus on an artist that explores similar ideas, that is more in alignment with what it is that you would want to explore. And then that is how you would justify it. But generally, I think most people normally go with just the 2 artists, and that's basically.
Just ensure that you are actually critically analyzing the works of these artists so that the reader, aka the examiner,
Yes.
have a clear understanding of what is happening.
And
okay?
what is the link?
Yes, that is
What
correct.
is the link?
Okay, here is another one. Here's the fun part. We're in the mechanics now. How do I format my text? You're into that sort of thing. Can you give some advice where that is concerned?
All right, so when we're formatting our text, it's very important that the layout, as is seen in this image here, you want to use up the text wrap option that is available to us in Microsoft Word. What this does, when you type up your explanatory notes, or the notes that gives the description of what it is that we are looking at, it wraps the text neatly around the image, and it creates a pleasant image. So this is something that you definitely want to do. You don't want the placement of your text in relation to the image to be disjointed. Not at all. Also, select text that's easy to read.
Stay away from the decorative fonts. Please stay away from the decorative fonts. Stay away from the fonts that curl a lot and all caps. It is okay. It's okay if you have cited your theme and you do the text for the cover or your title page or even the one that starts. But when you're writing in the body, stay away from decorative text.
Also, try and ensure that the image that you're putting in this, inserting in this part of the journal, ensure that it is clear. Ensure that it is properly mounted. You want to ensure that it has a nice border if necessary, or if you want to use a drop shadow to highlight the image, to cause it to stand out. That is some other option that you may want to consider.
Okay, so how do I format my text? Here are four tips. So, tip number 1.
All right, so
You want to take this one? Go ahead.
I could. So tip number 1 is you want to ensure that when you're taking that picture, do not put the picture on a flat surface and then try and take the picture from an angle or from a distance. Because when you do that, what will happen is that when you capture that image, it is going to be angled. And so you'll be looking at the image in perspective. And this will not necessarily give your examiner or the viewer who will be perusing your journal an opportunity to properly appreciate all of the aspects of your image. So one of the things that is recommended is that you place that image on a wall.
A neutral color. What do I mean? We know neutrals to be black and white. But you want contrast. For example, if your work is predominantly light in color, you don't want to place it on a white background because that washes out the work. You want to probably put it on a solid black, a really dark background, and take your picture. If it is predominantly of black or dark hues, you want to put it on a white background.
Exactly, so
Right.
you get that lovely contrast.
So that is tip number 1. Tip number 2. So, tip number 2. Light your works properly.
What do you mean by that? To light your works properly.
Don't take the photo of the work in the dark. Too many times the work comes up on the page. You can't make out what it is.
Oh, you mean the grayscale photos that we take, and when you take the image, it's kind of hard for you to discern the values in the background versus the values
It's
that's
not even
actually
so
on the work.
grayscale. Sometimes you'll be standing in the light and taking the picture of the work. Try to avoid that. You're also going to avoid direct light. Make it indirect. The best place, I take pictures of my artwork, right, in outside when it is day, but I don't put it in direct sunlight. So you don't want any light bouncing off it.
Okay.
Or you want to take the flash off the camera some of the times when you're
Yes.
doing that as well.
Especially
So-
when you have shiny surfaces working with.
That is correct. So make sure the place is properly lit. Next tip is to adjust your camera settings.
Yep, you definitely want to do that.
You want to make sure that you have most of the work within the frame and not more space than the work.
Exactly. Because we're not necessarily interested in the
This-
background.
No, we want to see the work.
We're not necessarily interested so much in the wall. You include a little section of the wall if it helps to create an effective emphasis where the work is concerned. But you want to really fill the frame of your camera as much as possible.
And you want to
with the
adjust
work.
it. You want to make sure you adjust it to get clear, crisp, bright images. Clear, crisp, bright. It shouldn't be vague.
Okay, so but that simply means though, Miss Chincy, you would also want to focus, steady the hand and that sort of thing, so as to capture the details.
Yeah,
because
why not?
if that is not done,
Remember, the
technically
work is going to be representing you. Okay?
they can also draw conclusions relative to the ideas that you're representing in the work by virtue of the title that you would have attributed to the piece of work. So it is important. We're not just asking you to do this because we want to give you more work to do. It works. It helps with the critique of their work.
Okay, remember, you're not only labeling finished pieces, but you have your steps. Yes, this is the process. So for step 1, step 2, step 3, you want to label them. Step 1 and all of your descriptive notes. Step 2, step 3. For some of you not using steps, it is the before, the during, and after. It is not limited to 3, but you must have at least 3 for the before, the during, and the after. So, how do you lay this out on the page? Now, I'm giving you 2 examples. Here is an example of a student who laid it out on the page. So these are the steps. So the examples are next. So this is by column, where
Exactly.
one picture fall below the next, one step fall below the next, and all of the description, they are written to the side.
Exactly.
That is one way. Now in the next frame, we have a student who decided to lay the works out in columns.
In rows.
In rows. Well, first was column, this is row, and the
Right.
description go below. So you have an example there
Exactly.
to follow, right? Now, after you have completed your steps and you are showing your final work and you have labeled it, remember we have stated before
That you do a critical
analysis. We cannot emphasize this enough. So here's an example of a student who have the work finished, doing the describing, the analyzing, interpreting, judging, and at the base there, they have the comparing and contrasting. Now, if you can see that, that's the work of another artist. That's the work of the artist that student actually looked at.
Exactly.
And this is one way of doing it. Okay, so this is a very good example.
It's not a bad example at all, because
Not
it
at
gives
all.
everybody an opportunity to reference what it is that your critique is talking about. So when we have the image there, we know that, you know, the description, we see whether or not the description is an effective description based on the image that is provided. We know that it's an effective analysis based on the image that is provided, so on and so forth. We also, I like the inclusion tool of the artist's work that they do in the compare and contrast, because when you have both images, regardless of what is written, the compare and contrast, we will see clearly between your work and the artist's work to see how your work would have been informed by same.
All right, so we are at the cover again, from cover to cover. Again, it's like merchandising. What is on the cover invites the reader into the work. The cover must be a balance between text and images. So here again, we have the same example of the old regal structure, right? And you're seeing the painting of that structure. So you're getting an idea that this child is focusing on drawing or painting buildings and in the landscape. Yes?
Definitely.
Here's another example. So in the next example, you have exploring surfaces. So I'm seeing samples of printmaking.
That sounds like somebody we all know.
It's my weak spot. So I'm seeing background texture. So I'm looking on the typeface, right, and the big pictorial designs. So to summarize this all, you're looking on the selection of your theme.
Right.
You have to unpack the theme in preparing the journal.
Yes, definitely.
All right? Good. You have to select the appropriate artists. You have to do your formatting and arranging of text and visuals. And you have to, students, consider your cover. After you have finished the piece, look at the cover. Alrighty? So it's now time to put it all together, right? Right now. Students, right now. Put it together. For those persons who have a little bit more time, fifth form I'm talking about, the grade 11,
yes,
put it together. Fourth formers, do not wait. Start putting it together now. Okay?
All right, so we hope that the tips that we would have shared with you today will actually help you in your completion of the works. Now that's all for today for CSEC Visual Arts, My Reflective Journal.